Hey everybody, welcome to Worship Uncoiled Online. We are super excited that you decided to join us tonight. We've got a great night. I've really enjoyed meeting with you guys online, but I cannot wait until we get back together again. Hopefully that will happen sometime soon. Hey, every night we start things off with a draw. We're going to do that again tonight. There are two ways you can enter the draw. You can enter the draw by either commenting on this post in Facebook or YouTube, or you can enter the draw by sending me an email with your name at cjmustin@fccbrazil.org. The draw is something we do every single week. We do that just as a drawing to give away a $10 gift card for those that sign in. It helps us keep track of numbers, and it's just fun to give away prizes. So make sure you get your name submitted there for the draw. Every week we also do a thing that we call the challenge. Now this week's challenge involves a piece of paper. That's all you need for this week's challenge. Just one piece of paper. Now what you're going to do with this piece of paper, this gets pretty technical, okay? So I'll just give you a heads up. Technical. You ready? Here's the technical part. Just wad it up. That's it. Just make it into a ball. Just wad up that piece of paper so it is into a ball. I know that was difficult. That was technical. So, here's what you're going to do, okay? We're not going to set a timer. We're just going to say between now and 8 o'clock, the person that can do this the most times in a row without dropping it wins. All right? So what you're going to do is you're just going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and you just keep going. The person that gets this done the most times before 8 o'clock wins. So, get your pieces of paper, wad them up, start bouncing them off your hands, and we'll see who can get the most times. You'll get to pick a prize from our prize table when we get back together physically at Worship Uncoiled. Hey everybody, every week we also talk about this thing called kingdom work. It's where you use your gifts, your abilities, your passions to further God's kingdom. And so I just asked that you guys let me know what you're doing for kingdom work, and we celebrated together on Facebook. It was so cool to see what you guys are doing during this time of quarantine to spread God's kingdom, spread God's love, and spread His joy. I think that's awesome. Keep that up. If you are doing kingdom work, please let me know so that we can celebrate together. I would love to put a post out that celebrates you and what you're doing as far as kingdom work goes. So please let me know that. We got this from CIY. We are going to CIY this summer. It will be happening one way or the other. I've been in touch with CIY. I was just on a phone call with them, and they said it will either happen in person on campus or it will happen digitally. So either way, we are doing CIY. Make sure you get signed up for that. You can sign up by emailing me at cjmustin@fccbrazil.org. Check out these CIY videos for CIY Mix and CIY Move. We hope that you'll be able to join us this year. everybody, now we're headed into a time of worship. We're going to do this the same way we've done this the last few weeks. We're going to post some links to some songs for you to listen to. Check out these links. They're songs that we've sung at Worship Uncoiled. They're incredible songs, and so check these out. I would love your suggestions for songs that would be good for this worship time. And so if you've got any suggestions for that, you can email those to me. But really allow these songs to speak to your heart and celebrate Jesus as we sing these songs together. So in just a few weeks, school will be out for the summer. How exciting is that? I realize, if I'm being honest, this is a little bit anticlimactic this year because you guys, for all intents and purposes, have already been out for a month. You are doing e-learning, and it will be exciting to be done with e-learning. And we're in the midst of this time where our culture is reacting to COVID-19. And this summer, we have a really incredible opportunity. We have an incredible opportunity to be influencers in a very real way. And so the next few weeks, I'm just going to be talking about this idea of influence and calling this series the Summer of Influence. Because I really want to encourage all of us to take this role seriously and to be influencers this summer. Now, I realize there's a lot of things that are unknown about this summer. We don't know when we're going to be able to get back together. We don't know how long we're going to be on quarantine. We don't know when life will go back to normal. But in the midst of all the unknown, the very real true thing is that we can be influencers. Influence is such a cool thing. It's the ability to take someone or something from where they are and help them take a step forward and move them to another place. When I was in high school, my parents had this creek running through their backyard. And when the rain would fall really hard and the creek would fill with water, it had a few twists and turns in it, and so it would slowly start to wash out my parents' yard. Now, it was probably nothing that was super concerning, but my dad and I wanted to take care of this. We wanted to influence the creek and make sure it was staying where it needed to stay, and there was a little bridge there. We didn't want it to wash out the bridge. And so we gathered up a few rocks, as many rocks as we could find, and we put them along the riverbank, and very quickly we realized we were going to run out of rocks. And so we had this giant sycamore tree that had gotten blown over in a storm. And we took the trunk and we cut it into huge sections. And we pushed and we grunted and we heaved and we hauled the sections of that sycamore tree trunk into the banks of this creek so that it would keep the water from washing away their yard. And I was super excited to watch the next rain, to watch the water flow down the creek and hit those logs and splash off in the right direction. And the next rain came and the creek filled, and I watched that water rush down the creek and hit those logs and splash off in the right direction, and I was so proud. It was absolutely incredible. The next day, I took a look at our creek. They were gone. The creek had risen so high that the logs just got floated up into the water and just washed away completely. And I learned a very valuable lesson that I should have known all along, that wood floats in water. But I learned a valuable lesson that the creek had more influence than I did. The book of 1 Peter is written to a group of Jesus followers that have been scattered because of persecution. And Peter is writing this book to encourage those followers of Jesus to continue to keep following Jesus. And he encourages them throughout the book because he realizes this scattering, the culture that they live in, people and influences are trying to do anything and everything they can to push them away from an intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. Does living in that kind of culture sound familiar? We may not be physically persecuted here in the United States, but the temptations are very real. Our culture continually pushes us away from an intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. Often when we think about influence, we think about how we can influence others. And I think that's a very important part of influence. But I think the conversation on influence needs to start a little bit deeper. You see, there's a layer of influence that we often fail to acknowledge. And in 1 Peter, Peter has written to his readers about continuing to follow Christ. Stay encouraged. Don't be afraid. Don't give in to their threats. And in 1 Peter 3, starting in verse 13, he says this: "But even if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear their threats. Do not be frightened, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord." Now listen, Peter is not saying that if you revere Christ as Lord in your hearts, you're not going to be hurt, you're not going to be damaged, no one's going to ever hurt you. What he's saying is that there is a level of influence that we have to lay as the foundation. And that's this: we have to influence ourselves. I love that he starts with this idea of no matter what happens, no matter what comes your way, things may be rough, they may be difficult, but in your heart, revere Christ as Lord. There is a deep foundation there, a deep level that is the foundation of our influence. It's how we allow ourselves to influence ourselves. It goes to our beliefs, to our core, to who we are, and to how we interact with Christ. Kirsten and I, we love to garden. We have plants that are started back in our bedroom right now. We started from seeds. We have seeds that we've started outdoors. And we are very particular about how we start and when we start and where we start our seeds. There are some seeds we start indoors under grow lights. We take potting mix and we soak it in water. And then we put the seeds in the potting mix. And we start those in the early spring before the frost. There are some seeds that we start all the way in November and allow them to grow in the ground all the way through the winter. There are some seeds that we have to start under hoop houses of plastic, and we start those in early winter. And there are some seeds that we start in these glass window cold frames, and those we start in winter, and they grow throughout the winter. And really at our core, what we're trying to get to is we're trying to give the seeds a good solid foundation and start. Because if the plants can have a good foundation, a good start, then they will be less susceptible to the influences that are going to come their way as they go on to produce fruit and grow into an adult plant. And I think the same stands true for us. We have to have a solid foundation in the way that we influence. And that foundation starts with how we influence ourselves, with our hearts, with how our hearts interact with Jesus Christ. And so Peter writes, "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord." See, Peter understands that his readers are facing outside influences of tremendous pressure. He realizes that people are facing some really serious stuff. And he realizes that the foundation of who they are, as far as their influence amongst themselves and how they hold on to Christ, is going to affect how those outside influences impact their life. And if Peter were writing to us today, he would say, "I recognize that there are a lot of outside influences. I realize that there are a lot of things that are pulling for your time and pushing for your energy. There are a lot of things that are trying to pull you away from Christ." And he would say, the foundation of influence starts with how you influence yourselves in your hearts. But in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. You see, when we revere Christ as Lord, it impacts every other influence in our lives. It's the foundation influence. The way we influence ourselves in Jesus Christ affects how influences will impact us and affects how our influence will impact others. It affects the way that you view others and treat them. When you revere Christ as Lord, it affects the way that you make decisions. It affects the way that you show love to people. It affects the way that you hear messages in your own head about your own value and your own self-worth. And so it's so vitally important that before we ever start thinking about influence being about influencing others, that we start here, that we start with how we influence ourselves, revering Christ as Lord. And the really practical question that comes out of this is, how do we do that? I think there are a few different ways that we can really start to build this foundation of influencing ourselves, of revering Christ as Lord. The first one is this: know who you are. Know who you are. You see, when you know who you are, when you know that you are loved, that you are valued, that you have a purpose, that God gifted you with passions and abilities to be used, and that you are not forgotten, when you know that, you believe that, and you live that, the outside influences that try to whisper in your ear and tell you you're nothing will not be as influential. Now, I'm not saying that they won't be there. I'm not saying that words won't hurt, because they will. But your foundation can hold strong. Know who you are. God says that you are loved and you are valuable. And sometimes we just have to remind ourselves who we are. And guys, I encourage you to remind yourselves often who you are. Have a friend that will text you and just remind you, hey, you're loved. Hey, you're beautiful. Hey, you are so good at fill in the blank. Know who you are. The second thing is this: know who you want to be. So often we get caught up in just going along in life that we forget who we want to be. And if we can know, all right, 5 years from now, I want to be this person down here, the way we interact with life right now at our core is going to be something that directs us toward that spot. And so I want to encourage you to know who you're going to be, who you want to be, and start working toward that. You know, I encouraged you to create a list back in February of the things that you want in a future spouse. I encourage you to create a list of who you want to be, and then start working toward those goals. Start taking small steps. Make decisions with who you want to be in the future in mind. And the third thing is this: spend time with God. Whether that's reading the Bible or listening to music or taking a walk in nature or spending time in quiet. God wants to know you, and God wants you to know Him. And if we can get this core set of foundation influence on ourselves right, it will change the way influences impact us and the way that we influence others. Peter said, but in your heart, revere Christ as Lord. No matter what happens, no matter what comes our way, life may be difficult, life may send us into tailspins, but in our hearts, revere Christ as Lord. You know, I give a practical challenge, and this week the practical challenge is simply this: pick one of those three areas. Know who you are, know who you want to be, or spend time with God, and start taking steps in that area. If you choose know who you are, I encourage you to write yourself a note about who you are on a day when you're feeling pretty good about yourself, so that you can go back and read that. I encourage you to have a friend that will text you and say, hey, you know, you are awesome. I encourage you to find some scriptures and write them down about how incredible God views you. If you're going to choose know who you want to be, I encourage you to make a list of who you want to be in the future. And get real serious. What kind of work ethic do you want to have? What kind of husband or wife do you want to be? What kind of parent do you want to be? And start writing those down, and then start making decisions with the end in mind. And if it's time with God, man, I just encourage you to dig into the Bible, spend some time in prayer, spend some time in quiet, spend some time walking out in God's creation, spend some time doing whatever it is that connects you with the heart of God. If we can get the foundation of this influence right, it is going to change the way we influence others. It is going to change the way that outside influences influence us. And so tonight I just wanted to focus here. The foundation of influence starts in ourselves. And we're going to talk about influencing others later this month. But this week, focus on yourself. The foundation of influence starts here. But in your hearts, revere Christ as Lord. Thanks for joining us tonight. You are loved. You are valuable. Know who you are. Know who you want to be. Spend time with God. And this, remind yourself often. Have a great week. We'll see you guys next week.